over the lunch hour to pop in and check it out. My name is Nikki, and I'm with the City of Vancouver. I've been with the city for about 5 years, and we have been doing business inspections since about 2003. We have a water resource protection ordinance that is another layer with our NPDES stormwater requirements. So we actually had been looking at some kind of high-risk businesses and protection of our drinking water for about 15 years before this permit requirement to look at source control. But they dovetail really well and are really similar sets of requirements. So we had an existing access database that we were using for our businesses where we tracked our the addresses, the contacts, the technical details of the businesses. It was all in this access database that we had built around 2010 and we're maintaining through desktop updates. And just looking forward at the new permit requirements, we were interested in different products. The access database had gotten some of the back end programming had gotten broken over time, and we had a real limited ability to edit and update that. And it also didn't have any mobile capabilities. So we were doing paper inspections and then bringing them back to the desk when I started with the city 5 years ago. So there were a lot of limitations to the access database. And with the new permit requirement, we wanted to invest in something, an update, something new that would work for us in different ways. So we went through a lot of these same software demos a few years ago, about 3 years ago, and met with a lot of these same companies back then, and so we had our existing inventory of businesses, and then we were looking at illicit discharge detection and elimination record keeping, as well as anticipating future permit requirements. So we chose MS4Front for our software update, and so we've been using that for a few years now. And when we started, if you guys can see my screen, there's on the left panel, you can see there's a few categories. So the industrial, commercial, those are our existing sites that we were already looking at with our water resource protection program. Pretty limited number of sites there compared to the new source control requirements, certainly. But and then IDDE was the other function we were using in the access database that we wanted to integrate into MS4Front. And so we were able to take our access database and export those facilities out into a spreadsheet and upload them into MS4Front. And they're spatially in that panel, they're in that unit, and we have a lot of the record from the access database on the contacts and the materials and some of the details in there we were able to bring over. And then for the IDDE, we were looking at, initially when we bought MS4Front, when we started working with Joe, we didn't have that new XML requirement yet, but we saw that coming. So we worked with Joe to build that out. So we have our, where my dashboard for my user kind of pops up is it starts with the IDDE, because that's a lot of times my data entry needs. I'm following up on a spill. So it's really nice. We have these set up for, there's a lot of search capabilities, and all of the fields we were able to program to match the XML requirements out of the permit. So all of the information you put into our IDDE records, they come up and display all of the information that's in the XML for your annual report. So we were able to integrate some of these different options, just like the XML requirements, whether it's a yes, no, or a drop down. All of those are included here and programmed into MS4Front. So it's really nice to have that just built in. And I'm on the desktop version of the software, but we do have an app There's an MS4Front app. So a lot of the times our staff is doing these IDDE investigations on the app and selecting these different fields from there. But there's a place for notes. I've added text fields, and it's all customizable. So we have it set up to match the XML requirements. But if you have additional needs at your agency, if there's other details that you want to record, you can customize those. It's all spatially referenced. So this is where this spill was. It's in the map, and you can, when you start out in the software, you can also start in the map. You can view the records in the map. So it's all spatially referenced. That was one of the questions Lori sent was, is there mapping components? And there are in MS4Front. You can kind of scroll in. They also have, my boxes are a little limited here. Let's see. Okay, here we go. We have, we can turn the aerials on and off. I usually keep them off because it sometimes, depending where you're at in the field, it can take a lot of data to load. But yeah, you're able to pull these up, view the forms, look at the incident, and look at the specifics. You can see some of our notes, our explanations. For the XML requirements for the reporting, for some of these, if you select other pollutants, you have to have an explanation. So we were able to incorporate that into the MS4Front programming. So so the IDDE is a lot of what we are using just day to day, especially right now with COVID-19. We're not doing a lot of business inspections, but I do have one in here to kind of show what it looks like. So we're able to customize these fields. We've got the NAICS code or the SIC code, depending on, you can kind of have whatever fields you want to include. We had added the Water Resource Protection Ordinance classification because that's something unique to the city of Vancouver. That's in our ordinance. The classifications are based on the amount of materials stored on site. And we have a set of best practices that go along with that. But so this is an example of the facilities. You can add contacts, you can create inspections. So this is the last inspection that I did. There are a lot of document templates that we can, report templates that we can pull out of here. And it's just a really great resource for us to stay organized and keep our facility information up to date. And it's really intuitive. This is the second interface that MS4Front has put together, and it's really intuitive on how you, use these different menus and how you use the different features. So it's been really helpful for that. So we've been using the software for about 3 years, and we have 4 staff right now that have a login to the app, and the desktop version here, we set up a user for our field staff so they can all just get in there. They are able to use the mobile app on the iPad. I don't know that we're using it on the phone just because we all have iPads. So that's definitely our kind of typical use. We're on the iPads or the desktop. I use a lot of the desktop. We were able to get our reporting for our annual reports for the last couple of years, reporting to the state on our IDDE. And for the value, for what we're getting, we're able to customize, the fields, we're able to customize the display, we're able to have a lot of flexibility in that. So it's a great value for us in our program. We can't take an off-the-shelf NPDS, one that just sticks strictly to NPDS requirements because we have the Water Resource Protection Ordinance. We just have more requirements. We have different needs. So we needed to be able to customize the record keeping, and MS4Front has got a lot of flexibility for that. We're able to upload and our list and modify those as we go. For the new source control requirements, we are starting with a windshield survey. And basically what we were able to do was create a form where we're going to go look at businesses in the field and try to determine if they have the potential to pollute to match that source control permit requirement. We are able to get the GIS business analyst from ArcMap. We got a list of around, I want to say it was around 8,500 businesses from ArcMap, from Esri. And we built a collector app to do some quality control on that because we had some issues with that data layer. But the idea is we purchased that. It's a subscription. So we purchased like a one-time download for this year, and we were able to make a new layer, and then we'll be able to put that into MS4Front and do a windshield survey to determine their potential to pollute. So so we've gone through and been able to come up with different types of pollutants and different risk categories, and we've been able to program that into here, into MS4Front with the individual facilities. You know, looking at just a drive-by, real quick potential to pollute scenario, and hoping that, you know, we have a place to start, which is the large number of businesses. But if we are able to evaluate the potential to pollute and reduce that number with the windshield survey, you know, we'd have something, a defensible business number for our inventory is the idea. Because the source control requirements, once you have your inventory number, you're kind of committed to it, and you have to do that 20% per year. So we didn't want to just take the, you know, GIS, the business analyst list, and just run with that. We wanted to do some quality assurance and make sure that that number is something we feel really comfortable with. So the windshield survey, we thought we would be started by now, but Clark County is in phase 2, and so we can't do non-essential travel, and so we aren't doing field work, including you know, a windshield survey, which was meant to be kind of a no contact format. It was meant to be kind of a quick and dirty, you know, just what can you see visually from outside, but even that we can't do in phase 2. And since the phases now have been pushed out another 3 weeks, I'm not sure when we'll be able to start, but we have plenty of time before inventory is due for our permit. And the main thing for us is having the ability in MS4Front to look at these sites, to add sites in the collector interface, and then to do our windshield survey in Survey 123, and you know, have that mobile capability to collect that information and provide us with a defensible source control inventory number. So so I am the main kind of administrator for our agency. I do a lot of the configurations and the industrial commercial inspections. I had collected that list and kind of put that in. But the IDDE and the windshield survey, we have our whole field group, our 4 other staff that are accessing that and using it. So so let's see. I'm going to see if I can pause that and go back to the questions here. Let's see. Okay, so looks like some of the other questions that Lori sent were about, does it include data collection for business inspections, complaints, spills, and illicit discharges? Yes, we have that as the IDDE category on our MS4Front, and it includes all of that, the spills and complaints. Reporting tools, we do have templates and letters that we can include in MS4Front. We had in the interface that we started with in MS4Front, the older interface, we had several translated letter templates, which was really great. It does have a mobile format. There's an app, and because it's integrated now with the Esri suite, we just have one login. It makes it really easy. The XML export, we do have that specifically for the permit requirement, and the fields that we have programmed in our IDDE match up with that. Is support available or customization? I have to say the support is fantastic. I email Joe all the time. Hey, I'm looking at this, or I'm trying to do that, or what do you think about a windshield survey? Can we create a new thing? So the support from MS4Front has been fantastic. I think they're really focused on trying to help agencies meet their permit requirements. Joe and I have talked a lot about the permit, so that's a big part of our use of the software. We do have our own water resource protection ordinance, but the documentation for the permit is really paramount, and MS4Front has been really helpful in making sure that we're meeting all of those requirements. We're able to do customization and set that up ourselves and define for ourselves using spreadsheets, which is really nice. Makes it really easy. This question says the pricing includes multiple users, data backups, and mobile access. And yes, it does. It includes all that. I'll let Joe talk a little bit more about the specifics on that, but does it include SWIP site inspections, which I assume means construction erosion control inspections? A SWIP can also be your source control. Stormwater pollution prevention plan can be construction or post-construction. So it does both. We don't use MS4Front for construction site inspections because we have a permitting enterprise software where we have to put those inspections in order to keep the workflow in a building permit. So we can't use MS4Front. We have to use the building module that the city uses, which does not have an app and is not mobile friendly and is very difficult to use, but that's what we have to do. So we don't use MS4Front for that. The last question on here is, can it create custom inspection forms for different types of site visits? And yes, that you can customize. So like I was showing we have the option to do, drop my screen share. There we go. We have the option to do drop downs, yes, no. You can totally customize those kinds of fields and responses. It's really nice because like for us, you can set it up just to match the permit, or you can set it up to match what your staff uses more often, like on our industrial commercial sites, if they are specifically for the water resource protection ordinance and what our ordinance says, we can program that in here, put it in a spreadsheet and upload it, and it's really nice. So these match this is the IDDE module, and they match the permit requirements for the XML, and that makes it really easy to do in the field. Our staff doesn't have to do free form, they just select the best fit. So so it's really nice for our group. Now I gotta move this here. So yeah, so I think that's kind of the rundown looking at the questions. That's been my experience. I'm in MS4Front every day, every other day, very often, looking at our spills, looking at our, we've been programming this windshield survey and trying to get this ready to go for source control. So I've been in here quite a bit trying that out. And so we have a lot of tests in here because we've been working on that windshield survey. And I've got a group of 4 people, we're trying to figure out how we're going to do this when we get back from COVID, at least in phase 3. And so you're able to run tests, you're able to kind of do that development with staff, and we're doing it all remotely. So it's really given us a lot of flexibility. And it is linked back to our city GIS. So our layers we publish out to ArcGIS Online, and then Joe can grab them and put them in MS4Front. So we still have, our own GIS layers and our own, inventory and attributes in GIS, and that's separate from this data collection. And we can add sites in Collector, but then they go back through our GIS staff for integration. So it's kind of a nice way to keep us updating, but also have the protections on the production database for GIS that they're looking for. So the one thing I will say is when we were purchasing MS4Front, our IT guys really gave us a run for the money. We had to set up a couple of conference calls and talk about, security and use of the data and logins and a lot of that stuff. We were able to, alleviate any of their concerns, but I think with some of these products, our IT staff is not really used to dealing with something that's not enterprise software. And when we have specific permit needs that we've got to meet, they're not going to be enterprise wide. They're specific for our stormwater group. But our IT folks, it was a little bit of a learning curve for them on what the needs were, that we really did need to buy a separate product. There isn't a place in the enterprise software for what we need, and the reporting requirements are getting more and more detailed from the state. We can't make the enterprise software, our asset management software, our permitting software, even our GIS, we can't make it do all of these functions. So I'm really grateful to have MS4Front, to have this complementing our other programs and giving us more flexibility in terms of mobile data entry and integration with GIS. It's been really a good experience for us. So I wanted to introduce Joe Lewis, who was our primary contact with MS4Front. And Joe and I thought we only had a half an hour. We found out we have an hour. So he's got some slides and some more of the kind of higher level information to share with you guys, and then we can do questions. I haven't seen the chat box pop up, but we can do some questions at the end if you guys have any other specifics you're curious about. And Joe can also demo some of the other functions that I'm not really using primarily, like construction site. So if you guys are interested in that. So I'll stop sharing. And then Joe, if you've got that button. Okay.
Yep. Okay. All right, so I think I did that right. Well, thank you, Nikki. That was really good context for me that I don't often get to hear, at least in that much detail. So really appreciate that. And, I guess the kind words about, being good to work with and whatnot. So I'm going to bore you with a couple slides. I think, Nikki, you went through some good examples for, that source control and facility inventory, and then the IDDE. I want to, I guess, give just a few minutes of background on our product itself, why we develop and whatnot, but then also talk a little bit about our, I guess I'll say, philosophy when it comes to offering this solution to MS4s across the country. I'm going to try the presentation mode, and I think I'll switch. Nikki, can you nod your head if that looks good? Okay. All right. So this is a product we've had out there since 2012. We had users come on board. Started in 2010 having conversations with MS4 permit managers in my neck of the woods, which is the Minneapolis-St. Paul area here in Minnesota, and just saw the need. We're a consulting engineering company with a department of GIS and web developers, so we're a little unique in that regard, really blending our environmental engineering background with our development team allows us to do this product. So I am a licensed engineer. I do a lot of stormwater related work, but also lead our technology product here, marketing and support. So with many others behind me. So Nikki alluded to the fact that she's seen two interfaces since she started the application a couple years ago. So I want to give some background on that. We chose in 2018 to embark on this effort to just redevelop our system. We had continually evolved the platform since 2010 when we started it, and just got to be a point where to keep going the direction we wanted to, we just needed to kind of redo some things and rebuild it from the ground up. So Nikki showed you the new version, the new interface, and we're still kind of in a little bit of a transition period from the old site to the new site, but we're going to look mostly at that new site. So jumping ahead, as I described what MS4Front is to people, first and foremost, it's really just, it's a data management solution centered on storing data. Happens to be in the cloud, not overly complicated. That concept isn't overly complicated, but beyond that, I think these other things add value and functionality to the system. So one of our key things that we focus on is the searchability and reportability, if that's a word, that go along with the data that's stored to document MS4 permit compliance. Right, because that's really a primary driver. You need to search it and report it to know what you're doing and to submit that to the regulatory agency. And then within that kind of framework, embedded within the solution is a number of just workflow automation features to let you do things a little bit more effectively, efficiently, and maybe not let things slip by you if you're not paying extra close attention and being diligent. And then, lastly, I want to point out, with the mobile interface, we made a change with the old interface to the new interface to go away from a custom application, mobile application that we developed and supported in-house to instead integrating with Esri products, so specifically Collector and Survey123 for ArcGIS. So we can look at that here in a little bit. So we're really pairing their very robust mobile applications for data collection with our searchability and reporting tools inside of the web application. Okay. So there was a couple questions that Nikki, you went through on that list that asked, does it do construction site inspections? Does it do this? Does it do that? So one of our principles, if you will, that we're trying to adhere to is, and a main reason why we did this redevelopment is to make it more adaptable to both different types of permits that are across the country, because they do vary slightly from region to region, state to state, and really just make it more useful and a little bit more easy for us to support, making it more uniform through the configuration options. So here I just called out a couple of the control measures that's listed in the Western Washington general permit, and really it's open-ended, so you can add a name and configure and kind of build your own category, if you will, within inside of the platform. So I was going through just the permit itself and looking at the different categories for the primary permittees, and just made kind of a quick note to myself here, like this is how MS4Front's capabilities kind of fall in line with those requirements. So I'm not going to go through that, but I wanted to just point that out real quick. So when we look at the different options, whether it's construction, stormwater, the IDE program, I wanted to show the architecture of how pages are built inside of MS4Front. And I'm spending a little bit of time on this because I think it's important to highlight our flexibility within the system. And I'm trying to think also about how are we separating ourselves from some of these options you might be looking at here down the road. And this is one I think separates us, but as you build a new section or category of data inside of your account, you define a couple of things. You name it, then you define the sections of data, and then beyond that section, you can have one or more forms that list out information that you're storing within that section. So this is generic, and it's meant to be generic, and I just have a couple more here that I have for specific control measures to give it more context. So this is an example of a construction stormwater category or page inside of the MS4Front application. So on the left-hand side, we have a section dedicated towards storing an inventory of sites. And then within the side of that, we further identify what's the actual data that we're storing with our site inventory. So a lot of it is basic and straightforward, but with each account, there's some nuances. It seems that for either some kind of workflow process or a permit numbering scheme, those kinds of things that need to be different from account to account. So, and then we step forward to the right. We have contacts, plan reviews, inspections, enforcements, and then way on the right we have permanent BMPs. So those would be those facilities that are installed in place permanently to treat stormwater and manage stormwater on a development site. So this is a la carte. You can, if you choose to not track permanent BMPs or facilities inside of MS4Front, or perhaps they're on a separate page entirely that you choose to build inside of MS4Front. Those are well within the range of options for the setup of any account. And this one is more straightforward. It's kind of modeled off of the Vancouver's account and Appendix 12 of the permit, where we have the list of discharge records, and these are the details that are, I don't know if I got them exactly right, but it's to demonstrate the type of data that's being stored for illicit discharges. And then lastly, for source control, I kind of mocked one up here as we're working with Vancouver to fine tune that final structure. They may not use all of these, or this won't resemble their final version, but we have the sites, that business inventory that they're working on refining, that we'll bring into MS4Front soon for their next steps. And then there can be a contact section again, and then inspections and so on. And I did put in a little placeholder for, I think there's a requirement or a language within the permit to do some educational messages to those business owners, property owners. So that would be an option to really specifically track those in its own section or category as you do that outreach. Okay. So I mentioned the data collection. So this is new with our new interface. We are passing data to and from ArcGIS Online. So we do have a requirement now for the users to have a license to ArcGIS Online to use the mobile application features and have that synced with MS4Front. So I'm not gonna go over that a lot unless there's questions. So, and then I have a couple slides here just to talk about, and Nikki alluded to this a little bit already, but we're not just a mobile app, we're not just a web cloud database to store data. We have these tools built in for convenience and usability. So here's an image of the searchability, the advanced or saved search features, and we can look at a live example here in a second. And then there was some questions about the reports. So here I just brought in two examples of, there's, from a configuration perspective, you define what data you're storing within a form, within a section and page in MS4Front. But you can also specify what is the layout and format of a report that's generated from MS4Front. So these are a couple of examples, and I'll walk through a live scenario here in a second. And then this is kind of my closing slide. I'm gonna go away from this and jump over to the browser. Okay, so I think I'm still sharing the right screen. So this is a different account that I've mocked up here. This has some records in an IDDE page, and what I've done that's different than what Nikki has showed you in her example was I made one of those custom reports and put it into this account. So here's a button, because I've done that's available. So this is going to be a fairly short report that's meant to just give you the preview of what a report could look like. So this is accomplished through formatting a Word document and putting in the appropriate reference tags. Basically you map the data that's stored in the form in MS4Front to where it's supposed to be inserted inside of this template report. So when I hit that button, it generated the report using the format that I uploaded. Okay. I'm going to switch accounts here real quick. Show off something else. So Nikki mentioned some searches. I was on a screen, her primary dashboard screen. Here you see another example of that. So we have some saved searches that we previously built inside of the system, inside of this account, that we can now quickly go back and access those. So for example, I have a search here that I've made previously that shows me the failed inspections in the first half of 2020. So if I go to view search and hit the search button, there I see all the instances where an inspection was completed and it was site condition was a fail. Actually, this is just any inspection that occurred. I have this mislabeled, but so here's just an example of if you wanted to view how many inspections you've done, whether they've passed, failed, or any condition. You can quickly access that. We can also view those results on a map. So there you see my markers pop up. I can change the color of these. That's a setting to make them stand out more. So there's my site. And there I can view this page to see more information about that specific failed inspection. I've talked about the configuration there on a couple of slides. I do want to show that interface. For accounts, we do give training for users to come in and do their own configurations, but it's really a partnering process to do that through a number of conversations, and it's depending on the preferences of users on how they want to approach this. So we have a configuration page here set towards that construction stormwater example page that I just was on. And now I have the sections. So we have the sites, that's the inventory, contacts. Then we have BMPs and inspections in this example. So here I can go into a form associated with this section, and I can choose to edit that. So you notice this is within inside of the interface, and this is available to users. It can be restricted to only site administrators or certain users within an account. So this is how you would modify that existing form, and we have tools to import or export the configuration of this form for just some usability things. So for example, I can go into this first field and see the characteristics or the settings associated with it. So here's the name of the permit. I can put in a description, and that is available. Similar to a box like circle icon like this, it would give users an instruction for what this field is for. Okay, and then we can identify the data type, pretty standard there. Text, currency, email, and so on. There's about 15 total there. And then we can have a number of other options selected. So can it be required? Is it read-only? Should we show it in the summary table overview when you access those sites or that data in that page? Okay, and there's a lot more options, and it depends on what data type you've selected. Those things are fairly straightforward from a database setup side of things. So we're doing this to give users the flexibility to configure their account the way that they'd like to. Okay. Trying to think what else I should highlight here. I'd like to go back to the other account. One of the things I want to offer here before we're done is to give those that are interested access to a trial or test account, if you will, that I'm working on setting up towards the permit requirements for your general permit. So I'm going to go back into this account, and here I've laid out just a number of different pages to show the range of flexibility. So, construction, stormwater, employee training, that's a possibility. It's not one of the more common uses, but we do have some users that utilize an employee training page to track some of that information. Public education is an option. I'm trying to think if there's other examples or other questions that were on that list that I should touch on. I should just briefly show the mobile setup. So I mentioned that we are looking at the integration with ArcGIS Online, or that's how we're collecting data now with our new interface. So I'm showing now just the web map through ArcGIS Online. So this would be accessed on a mobile device through Collector for ArcGIS. So what we do is make, we push the data in from MS4Front to a feature service layer in ArcGIS Online. And within the configured pop-up window, I can click Launch to create a new inspection. So if you're familiar with Survey 123, this is the form-centric app from ArcGIS or Esri. So you would just go through your form, complete that inspection, and hit save. One feature that we do have at the bottom I'll highlight is the ability to send a email that contains a copy of the inspection report. So if I hit the yes button, I can input in the report recipients. We do preload contacts associated with the site. I selected a site here that didn't have any existing contacts, so they're not showing up there. So you can add or edit that list, and then you can put in a custom email message included in the body of the email. Then you can choose the report type that you're doing. So you can have multiple report types depending on the type of inspection, or maybe there's a kind of a notice of violation or field warning type of report you send that's different than a typical standard inspection report. So when that button is checked to submit it, it's going to send that information to MS4Front. And if you chose the email feature, it will send that email to those recipient addresses. So that would fall under, I feel, the workflow automation category that I touched on there at the beginning. Yeah, so I think I'm kind of running out of examples that I planned to go over. So I think we could open it up for questions a few minutes early, and certainly I can jump into other things in more detail based on the questions. And for my closing point here, I'll share my screen later, perhaps, if there's a need for contact information. So, is there questions?
Yeah, hi, this is Jeremy Graham. I was hoping that maybe you could show us some of the detail. Two things. One, definitely I'm interested in what features are included in the education and outreach layout that you had, and then also the employee training. City of Olympia I know we'd love to be able to look and see what that looks like. I know that within the municipal stormwater permit, it's a requirement for everybody, and tracking has been one of the more difficult things that we've come up against. So if you're able to fill us in on that, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Sure. So I will reshare the screen. Okay. So in this example that I have, I'm guessing that I don't have a detailed really breakdown of employee training built out as far as a form. So I do have one record here that I've created, and I think I kept it pretty simple. And one of the I won't say challenges, but one of the things that comes with having a highly configurable system platform is that you have to make a lot of decisions. We offer some kind of default templates for users to start with, But I had the slides up there where, you know, you can make it kind of as complex as you want to. There really isn't a limit on how many, you know, sections you could add within a page. So in this example, I made, you know, an ID, kind of a unique identifying ID, and I just kept the text there in that example. I assigned a date and then a description of the activity. We can add attachments to this. I didn't turn that option on, but that could be on. So you upload any training materials that you covered or certificates, scan copies of certificates or something. And then, you know, you could make an attendee list. I think that would be a wise thing to do if you're looking to report by staff person. And then there is.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Now, one of the things I think that we have the most difficulty with is tracking staff and what training they have received. I know in the past, you know, we've collected, you know, we've had checklists, you have people sign in, here's the, you know, and then you can have stacks of, you know, this information of trainings and all these folks have attended this training, but to be able to actually identify and track, maybe, I mean, I guess I would look at it as basically developing a training ID for an individual person and then being able to track their training, I think is probably where we would be looking at doing something. And I'm not sure how much it looks like you're able to kind of build this out with many possibilities, and that might be something that we could work with.
Yeah, well, certainly you could. I gave the example where you use your activities, training activities, as you know, as the primary data set, if you will. But you could flip it around and use the employees as the primary data set, and you just attach those training activities that they've attended to them. So that would be another option, like you mentioned. Yeah, and we just could talk through that and come up with the best plan.
And then the education and outreach, we talked a little bit about in terms of the behavior change requirement. If you wanted to, that's a little different from training, although they sound similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was another part of his question.
Okay. So with public education and outreach, I think I did a similar thing where I set up, you know, sort of a basic form here to start with. You know, here this would be like an activity that's completed. So, you know, what is your activity? You could classify it into a type, and then you could, you know, enter in some way the you know, desired behavior change that you're trying to accomplish, or if it was just a kind of a general awareness purpose. So yeah, in there I do have that within a drop-down list, and this would be a multi-select field. So you could, if there's overlap between those purposes, you could flag multiple ones. And then, you know, beyond this, you could build in some subsections that would allow you to, over time, you report on some metrics that you could measure effect on behavior. Nikki, you had the example of, you know, condition of a dumpster or a dumpster bin. You know, is there litter and debris around there? Is it being kept up? You know, that's something that's easily identifiable, and you can link to your efforts for education in that regard. So it's really not built into this form as I've currently configured it, but where there's a will, there's a way with MS4Front. So I do see that here I have the attachment section turned on for this. So this would be what that looks like. So you would browse the appropriate files there and keep them in here as you desire to have them for reference.
Yeah. There were a few questions in the chat. So I think, oh, now there's a new one. So the first question was from Jackie, does this pull the attribute info from GIS? So when you're in the ArcGIS collector and you're seeing that pop up when you click on a site, that's pulling the attributes out of GIS, right, Joe?
Yeah, so really the primary direction that we have here as far as the sharing information, you know, there's a couple different directions, but you know, this set of points is tied to an inventory of construction sites in this example, maintained in MS4Front. They're updated automatically to ArcGIS Online to a feature layer. And then we are embedding this link, and that's linked to a Survey 123 form. So when that Survey 123 form is collected, it's saved to MS4Front. So, there's lots of capabilities, and, we're still kind of exploring some of the increased functionality here that users are wanting to see within our new interface, such as how should those directions be reversed. We can do that. We just have focused on this one directional kind of circle, if you will, for now. But certainly, data can be updated in ArcGIS Online and sent back to MS4Front. It just is, becomes a little more complicated. But like I said, we're focusing on kind of the one direction right now.
Okay.
So just to confirm, this is Jackie, by the way. It's updated in MS4Front and then sent to ArcGIS, or is it ArcGIS? Which is the direction again?
Yeah, so for this example, for construction site inventory, you maintain it and update it in MS4Front. That's where the users interact with it and keep it up to date. And then it's synced to ArcGIS Online to a feature service.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. There was another chat question. What does the inspection look like when someone receives the email?
Oh, okay.
So you have a PDF option. I know for our illicit discharges, if we schedule a follow-up, we get an email that says, here's your Outlook event for your scheduled follow-up. But I think the example you were looking at was like a PDF inspection report, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to open up one that I happened to have sent the other day, day or two. So, it's sent. The email is sent from our email server, and it's a simplistic message. There's some ability to tailor that towards your settings, and I am opening up the PDF right now, and this is our basic report format, not the one that was customized that I generated from the web interface earlier. Although you saw the options within the Survey 123 form to select the form you're interested in. So in this one, it's our default one. So you see it's a PDF. It's attached to that email. Don't get hung up on the format here. And this was kind of a testing training inspection. So there's actually not values or responses brought into this. So it's blank except for those question items in the form itself. So,
but that's what it looks like. Yeah, it's
so Joe, my question would be then, if you were to have done that inspection and you were only limited, maybe you only checked 2 of those boxes, when they would receive that email and that PDF that was attached, would that only identify those 2 deficiencies, or would it show that those entire lists with those deficiencies checked?
Yeah, it would show the entire list. One thing that I'm talking with other users about is, if you have a kind of a field warning form, you might pull in different information from your survey form, your inspection form, versus just kind of a standard you're in compliance, or you pull in every field, or maybe there's some special comments related to that warning that you're putting in there because there was deficiencies. So that could go into a deficiency field warning form differently than it does in a standard in compliance inspection.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, there was another question. Is there a notification system within the training module that lets you know when staff need to re-up a certification? Is that something where you could set notifications?
So that would be best accomplished through our search feature. So if I have, see if I can come up with a good example here. So if I have employee training, I want to do a save search and I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to say, I'm searching my training activities and see if this is going to work for me. I'll just choose a date field, and this could be an expiration date that's entered when a certification is achieved or renewed. So if I say basically I can set a time period from that date is after, I think that would be right. There we go, is after the next 1 year. So I need to choose what I want to see in that result table. And I'll just choose a couple here. And that doesn't make sense to choose a map color, but I'm going to anyways. So if I search that, you know, I didn't have a criteria here that's met to get a search result. So bad example for me trying to do this on the fly, but the answer is yes. We can build in a search, and then that says, you know, what is the expiration date of these pending certifications or these existing certifications. We can build that within inside of this search window, and then some alerts can be built off of that.
Okay, we've only got a couple minutes left. There are a couple more questions. The one in the chat says, can you bring up the ArcGIS Survey 123 map you showed and display layers for all different inspection types at the same time? And also add our own data layers, for example, the storm conveyance system.
Yeah, can you bring up this map you showed? Yeah, so one of the things that I really like about our integration with ArcGIS Online is within inside of this web map. So this is one layer. This is the site layer inventory in this construction stormwater example. We could symbolize this layer to show you know, sites that on their last inspection had a deficiency or received a warning, or we could also have another version of that layer that says, well, these are the ones that are due for an inspection. So you see that visually within the map interface. And then from there you can launch the inspection based on that symbology, based on that filter. It's essentially a filter of the same, different filters on the same layer. If I understand the question correctly. Oh, and then, yeah, you can add in, you know, more than just construction stormwater to this map. You have that flexibility you could have separate standalone web maps that you would access in Collector, or it could be in one combined, you know, MS4 stormwater web map that you would have your different layers, whether it's IDDE or source control or construction. Yeah. And then you can, you know, because we're in ArcGIS Online already, if you have other information stored there already about your infrastructure or conveyance, that can easily be added to the map as well in Collector, and it can also be, you know, brought into the MS4Front map interface as well.
Yeah, I know we have our conveyance in there from our storm system. And the last question, what does an export for the annual report to ecology look like? For IDDE, can it export to the .xml format?
Yeah, so I think, Nikki, you maybe mentioned that earlier on. So we are generating an XML report. Because we're in between versions here, we kind of punted this beginning of this year because we had migrated data, but haven't replicated that XML report yet. But that is the plan. So the XML report, you know, we had it functioning in the prior interface, but not yet replicated it. So, you know, I can follow up with an example of that. So it's not an easy format to read, at least large data sets, but certainly I can do that as a follow-up.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that's time. I don't know if Lori, do you want to wrap us up or?
Yes, I want to thank both of you. You did a great presentation, lots of great information. I want to